by knight or knave. Lady Rosamund of Whitmore had always known her fate to marry a man of her father's choosing. But when she was wed to Sir Hugh Fitzalan, a cold, battle-hardened knight, she found herself questioning everything. His voice was quiet, hesitant. "You do not want this marriage," he murmured. "Then why do your eyes tell me otherwise?" Chapter 1. The Reluctant Bride. The chill of Whitmore Castle seeped into Rosamund's bones, mirroring the icy dread that had taken root in her heart. The stone walls, usually a comforting embrace, felt like a prison today. Tapestries depicting scenes of valor and chivalry seemed to mock her quiet desperation, their vibrant threads a stark contrast to the grayness of her mood. Sunlight, fractured by the stained glass windows of the great hall, painted fleeting patterns on the floor, offering no warmth, no solace. Today, she was to be wed to Sir Hugh Fitzalan, a man she barely knew, a knight whose reputation for valor in battle was only surpassed by the rumors of his cold, distant demeanor. Her reflection in the polished silver mirror showed a woman on the precipice of a life she had not chosen. Rosamund traced the delicate silver embroidery of her gown, a gift from her father, Lord Elric. The fabric, a deep sapphire blue, was meant to complement her eyes, but today, those eyes reflected only a storm of uncertainty. Her golden hair, usually worn loose and flowing, was tightly braided, adorned with pearls that felt more like shackles than ornaments. She touched the cold stones, a subtle rebellion against the finery that felt alien to her. The sounds of the castle preparing for the wedding feast filtered through the thick wooden door of her chamber. The clatter of dishes, the boisterous laughter of the men-at-arms, the hurried footsteps of servants, all of it felt distant, muffled, as if she were already submerged in the depths of a life she did not want. Her old nurse, Alara, bustled about, fussing over the final details of Rosamund's appearance. Alara, with her weathered hands and kind eyes, had been a constant presence in Rosamund's life, a comforting anchor in the often turbulent waters of noble existence. "My lady, you look radiant," Alara said, her voice attempting a cheerfulness that didn't quite reach her eyes. She adjusted the veil, a delicate lace that cascaded down Rosamund's back, obscuring the intricate details of the gown. "Sir Hugh is a fortunate man." Rosamund managed a weak smile. "Fortunate? Or am I the fortunate one, Alara? To be bound to a man whose heart is said to be as cold as the steel he wields?" Alara's hand paused on Rosamund's shoulder. "He is a knight of honor, my lady. That is worth more than a warm heart in these times. He will protect you. He will provide for you. That is all that matters." But it wasn't all that mattered to Rosamund. She yearned for more than protection, more than provision. She craved a connection, a spark of understanding, a shared laughter that echoed not just in the grand halls, but in the quiet moments between two souls. She had spent her life observing the subtle dances of courtship, the veiled glances and whispered promises, and she had always hoped for a love that bloomed naturally, not one forced upon her by duty. The heavy oak door creaked open, and Lord Elric entered, his presence filling the chamber. He was a man of imposing stature, his face etched with the lines of responsibility and the weight of his noble lineage. He surveyed Rosamund with a critical eye, his gaze lingering on the pearls in her hair, the richness of her gown. "You are ready, daughter," he stated, his voice devoid of warmth, yet laced with a subtle undercurrent of expectation. "The Fitzalans are a powerful family. This alliance will secure our lands, our future." Rosamund lowered her gaze. "Yes, father." The words felt like lead in her mouth. She knew the importance of this union, the strategic advantage it offered, the peace it would bring to their borders. But the price, her own happiness, felt unbearably high. Lord Elric approached her, placing a heavy hand on her arm. "Do not disappoint me, Rosamund. Your duty is to your family, to your name. Love is a luxury we cannot afford." His words were a chilling reminder of the realities of her world. Love was a fragile blossom, easily crushed beneath the weight of duty and ambition. She straightened her shoulders, summoning a strength she didn't know she possessed. She would play her part, fulfill her obligation, but she would guard her heart, keep it safe from the cold winds of this arranged union. As she walked down the aisle of the castle chapel, the scent of incense and beeswax candles filled the air. The murmurs of the assembled guests washed over her, a sea of unfamiliar faces. And then she saw him. Sir Hugh Fitzallen stood at the altar, his back ramrod straight, his figure clad in a dark tunic embroidered with the silver falcon of his house. He turned, and their eyes met. His face was not unkind, but it was guarded, etched with a weariness that seemed to go beyond the physical scars of battle. His eyes, a deep, penetrating gray, held a hint of something she couldn't quite decipher: sadness, perhaps, or a resignation that mirrored her own. His voice was quiet, hesitant, when the vows were spoken, a stark contrast to the booming pronouncements of the priest. "You do not want this marriage," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear as he leaned in to place the ring on her finger. The gold band felt heavy, a symbol of the bond that now tied them together. Rosamund met his gaze, surprised by his honesty, by the vulnerability she glimpsed beneath his stoic exterior. "Then, why do your eyes tell me otherwise?" she whispered back, her voice barely audible above the rustle of her gown. A flicker of something surprise, perhaps even a hint of admiration, crossed his face before he masked it again. The ceremony continued, the ancient words binding them together, forging a link between two strangers in a world where love was a battlefield and duty was the only armor. As the priest declared them husband and wife, a lone raven, perched high on a rafter of the chapel, let out a mournful cry, a sound that seemed to echo the unspoken fears and uncertain futures of the newly wedded pair. The heavy doors of the chapel swung shut, casting a shadow over the path that lay ahead, a path fraught with both peril and the faintest glimmer of a hope that Rosamund dared not yet acknowledge. Chapter 2. Shadows of Whitmore. The feasting hall of Whitmore was a cacophony of sound and light. Torches blazed, casting flickering shadows on the stone walls, illuminating the long tables laden with food and drink. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meats, spiced wine, and the sweat of 100 bodies pressed together in celebration. Yet, amidst the revelry, Rosamund felt a profound sense of isolation. She sat beside Sir Hugh at the high table, a silent observer of the festivities that were meant to honor their union. Hugh, to his credit, made an effort to engage in polite conversation, but his words felt formal, strained. He spoke of the recent skirmishes along the border, of the need to strengthen the castle's defenses, of the upcoming harvest. He did not speak of himself, of his hopes or fears, of the burden he carried as a knight and now as a husband. Rosamund, in turn, responded with equal reserve, her answers brief, her gaze often drifting towards the swirling dancers and laughing courtiers. She noticed the way the other women looked at Hugh, their eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and envy. He was, undeniably, a striking figure, his broad shoulders and strong jawline hinting at the power he wielded. But Rosamund saw something more, a weariness in his eyes, a subtle slump in his posture that betrayed the weight of his responsibilities. During a lull in the conversation, a young woman, Lady Isolde, a distant cousin of Rosamund's, approached the high table. Her smile was bright, her eyes sparkling with a mischievous glint. She leaned in towards Hugh, her voice low and flirtatious. "Sir Hugh," she purred, "I hear tales of your bravery on the battlefield. They say you single-handedly defeated a dozen enemy knights." Hugh's expression remained unchanged, his voice calm and measured. "The tales are often exaggerated, Lady Isolde. It was a team effort as always." Isolde persisted, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. "But surely there must be some truth to them." A knight of your stature, Rosamund felt a flicker of annoyance, a possessiveness she hadn't expected. She cleared her throat, her voice sharper than she intended. "Lady Isolde, I believe the musicians are about to begin another set. Perhaps you would care to dance?" Isolde's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing slightly. She gave a curt nod and retreated, her departure leaving a palpable tension in the air. Hugh glanced at Rosamund, a question in his eyes. I apologize if I overstepped, Rosamund said, her voice softer now. But I did not appreciate her forwardness. Hugh's lips curved into a faint smile, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. You have no need to apologize, my lady. I am your husband, and I am bound to defend your honor, as well as my own. His words, though simple, sent an unexpected warmth through Rosamund. It was a small gesture, a subtle acknowledgement of their bond, but it was enough to ease the tightness in her chest. As the evening wore on, the festivities began to wind down. Guests, weary from feasting and dancing, began to drift away, their laughter fading into the night. Rosamund and Hugh were left alone at the high table, the remnants of the feast spread before them. The silence between them felt heavy, laden with unspoken words. Hugh finally broke the silence, his voice low and hesitant. My Lady Rosamund, I know this marriage is not what you desired. I know I am not the husband you envisioned. Rosamund met his gaze, surprised by his candor. And what husband did I envision, Sir Hugh? He looked away, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames of the torches. A man of warmth, perhaps. A man who could offer you more than just a title and protection. A man who could love you. The word hung in the air between them, a fragile, unspoken promise. Rosamund felt a tremor run through her, a mixture of fear and a strange, unfamiliar hope. And can you not offer those things, Sir Hugh? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. He turned back to her, his eyes searching hers. I have been a soldier for most of my life, Rosamund. I have seen too much death, too much suffering. I have learned to guard my heart, to keep it closed off from the world. I do not know if I am capable of loving anyone. His honesty, though painful, was also refreshing. He did not offer false promises, did not pretend to be something he was not. He was a man scarred by his past, burdened by his duty, and yet there was a vulnerability in his eyes that drew her to him. Perhaps, Rosamund said, her voice gaining strength, perhaps we can learn together, Sir Hugh. Perhaps we can find a way to build something real, something more than just an alliance. He reached out, his hand hovering over hers, his fingers brushing lightly against her skin. The touch was tentative, hesitant, but it sent a shiver of warmth through her. He did not speak, but his eyes held a question, a plea for understanding. And in that moment, Rosamund knew that she was not alone in her fears, in her doubts. They were two souls, bound together by fate, standing on the precipice of a new life, a life filled with uncertainty, but also with the faintest glimmer of hope. As a lone servant began to clear the remnants of the feast, the shadows in the hall seemed to deepen, concealing the unspoken desires and fragile promises that hung in the air, waiting to be discovered, nurtured, or perhaps shattered by the harsh realities of the world that awaited them. The heavy silence fell again, broken only by the crackling of the dying embers in the hearth, a sound that mirrored the uncertain future that stretched before them, a future shrouded in the shadows of Whitmore. Chapter 3. A Knight's Confession. The days that followed the wedding were a strange mixture of formality and tentative intimacy. Rosamund and Hugh settled into a routine, their interactions marked by a polite distance that slowly began to thaw. They shared meals in the great hall, attended to the duties of the estate, and occasionally exchanged brief, guarded conversations. Rosamund found herself observing Hugh, studying his every move, searching for clues to the man beneath the armor. She discovered that he was a man of quiet habits. He rose early each morning, spending hours in the training yard, honing his skills with sword and lance. He was meticulous in his attention to detail, overseeing the castle's defenses, ensuring the well-being of his men-at-arms. He was also a man of faith, spending time each day in the castle chapel, his prayers a silent testament to the burdens he carried. One evening, after a particularly long day overseeing the harvest, Rosamund found Hugh alone in the library. The room was dimly lit, the only source of light coming from a single candle on the large oak table. He was seated in a high-backed chair, a book open in his lap, but his gaze was fixed on the flickering flame, his expression lost in thought. Rosamund hesitated at the doorway, unsure whether to intrude. but something in his posture, a subtle slump of his shoulders, drew her to him. She cleared her throat softly, and he looked up, startled. "My lady," he said, rising to his feet. "I did not hear you enter." "I apologize for disturbing you," Rosamund said. I saw the light and wondered if you were still awake." He gestured towards a chair opposite him. "Please sit." "I was just reflecting." Rosamund took a seat, her gaze drawn to the book on the table. It was a volume of ancient poetry, the pages worn and yellowed with age. She raised an eyebrow, surprised. "I did not expect to find you reading poetry, Sir Hugh," she said. A faint blush colored his cheeks. "It is a habit from my youth. My mother was a great lover of poetry. She taught me to appreciate the beauty of words, the power of language." It was the first time he had mentioned his mother, the first glimpse into his past. Rosamund seized the opportunity. "Tell me about her," she said softly. "Tell me about your family." Hugh hesitated, his gaze drifting back to the candle flame. He seemed to be wrestling with an internal struggle, weighing the risks of revealing too much. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and filled with a sadness that tugged at Rosamund's heart. "My mother was a gentle soul," he began. "She was not suited for the harsh realities of court life. My father was a stern man, a warrior through and through. He had little patience for weakness, for sentimentality. He demanded much of me, of my brother, William." He paused, his fingers tracing the outline of the candle holder. "William was different. He was more like my mother, gentle, artistic. He had no interest in warfare, in the duties of a knight. He preferred to spend his time drawing, composing music, reading poetry." Rosamund leaned forward, her interest piqued. "And your father he did not approve?" Hugh's jaw tightened. "He saw it as a weakness, a betrayal of our family's legacy. He pushed William relentlessly, forcing him to train, to fight. He wanted to make him into a warrior, into a man he could be proud of." He paused again, his voice choked with emotion. It did not end well. William he could not bear the pressure, the constant disapproval. One day, he took his own life. Rosamund gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The revelation was shocking, devastating. She saw the pain etched on Hugh's face, the guilt that haunted him. I am so sorry, Hugh," she said, her voice filled with genuine compassion. "I had no idea." He shook his head, his eyes filled with tears. "It is a burden I have carried for many years. My father blamed me, in part. He said I should have been a better brother, a better example. He said I should have protected William." The weight of his confession hung heavy in the air. Rosamund reached out, her hand covering his. The touch was spontaneous, instinctive, a gesture of comfort and understanding. "It was not your fault, Hugh," she said softly. "You were just a boy. You could not have known." He looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "But I should have seen the signs. I should have done something." "You cannot blame yourself," Rosamund insisted. "Your brother made his own choice. It was a tragic one, but it was his." He closed his eyes, his hand gripping hers tightly. "I have lived with the guilt for so long, Rosamund. I have tried to be the son my father wanted, the knight he expected. I have tried to atone for my failure." Rosamund squeezed his hand, her heart aching for him. "You have nothing to atone for, Hugh. You are a good man, a honorable knight. You have proven that time and again." He opened his eyes, his gaze locked on hers. "But I am not whole, Rosamund. I am broken. And I fear I will never be able to love anyone the way I should." He pulled his hand from hers. "I will leave you to your reading, my lord." Rosamund rose, and as she turned toward the door a tear slipped free and rolled down her cheek, unnoticed by the night. The shadows of the library lengthened as the candle burned lower, a silent witness to the night's confession and the unspoken fears that now lay exposed, raw and vulnerable, in the quiet stillness of the night. Chapter 4. The Whispers of Court. News of the alliance between Whitmore and the Fitzalans spread quickly, reaching the ears of King Edric and his royal court. An invitation arrived, summoning Sir Hugh and Lady Rosamond to attend a royal gathering, a celebration of the recent victory against a rebellious northern lord. Rosamond, having spent most of her life within the walls of Whitmore, felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The royal court was a world of intricate politics, veiled ambitions, and dangerous rivalries. Hugh, though accustomed to the court's machinations, seemed less than enthusiastic about the prospect. "It is a viper's nest, Rosamond," he warned her. "Be wary of everyone, trust no one. The smiles are often false, the compliments laced with poison." Rosamond, however, was determined to make the most of the opportunity. She saw it as a chance to escape the confines of Whitmore, to experience a world beyond the familiar routines of her daily life. She spent hours selecting the perfect gowns, choosing jewels that would complement her beauty without appearing ostentatious. She practiced her curtsies, rehearsed her greetings, determined to make a favorable impression. The journey to the royal court was long and arduous, but Rosamond found herself captivated by the changing landscapes, the bustling towns, and the glimpses of a world she had only read about in books. Hugh remained quiet and reserved throughout the journey, his gaze often fixed on the horizon, his thoughts seemingly miles away. Upon their arrival at the royal castle, Rosamond was immediately struck by its grandeur. The towering walls, the ornate tapestries, the sheer number of courtiers and nobles, it was a world of dazzling splendor, a stark contrast to the more austere atmosphere of Whitmore. They were greeted with a flurry of activity, servants rushing to attend to their needs, courtiers vying for their attention. Rosamond, despite her initial apprehension, found herself navigating the court's intricacies with surprising ease. She possessed a natural grace and charm that drew people to her. She engaged in polite conversation, listened attentively, and offered thoughtful responses. She quickly learned to discern the genuine from the false, the sincere from the manipulative. Hugh, however, remained aloof, his demeanor distant and unapproachable. He participated in the necessary formalities, but he seemed to take little pleasure in the social gatherings, the lavish feasts, the elaborate entertainments. He preferred to spend his time in the company of other knights, discussing matters of warfare and strategy. Rosamond noticed the way some of the court ladies looked at Hugh, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and desire. He was, after all, a renowned warrior, a powerful lord, and a newly married man. Rumors began to circulate, whispers of his coldness, his detachment, his supposed lack of affection for his new bride. One evening, during a grand ball, Rosamond found herself surrounded by a group of noble women, their conversation laced with subtle barbs and veiled innuendos. Lady Beatrice, a woman known for her sharp tongue and her penchant for gossip, smiled slyly at Rosamond. "My dear Lady Rosamond," she purred, "you must be so proud of your valiant husband. He is the talk of the court. But they do say he is not a man of warm affections." Rosamond felt her cheeks flush with anger, but she maintained her composure. "Sir Hugh is a man of honor and duty, Lady Beatrice. He is not one for frivolous displays of emotion." Lady Beatrice's smile widened. "Oh, I am sure. But a woman needs more than just honor and duty, does she not? A woman needs passion, excitement, a man who can make her heart race." Another woman, Lady Eleanor, chimed in. "They say he is still haunted by his past, by the tragic death of his brother, that he is incapable of truly loving anyone." The whispers felt like daggers, piercing Rosamond's heart. She knew the truth of Hugh's past, the pain he carried, but to hear it spoken so cruelly, so publicly, filled her with a fierce protectiveness. "You speak of things you know nothing about," Rosamond said, her voice trembling slightly. "Sir Hugh is a complex man, a man of deep emotions. He is not one to wear his heart on his sleeve, but that does not mean he is incapable of love." Lady Beatrice raised an eyebrow, her expression skeptical. "Perhaps. But I have yet to see any evidence of it. He seems more interested in his sword than his wife." The other women giggled, their eyes filled with malicious amusement. Rosamond felt a surge of anger, a desire to defend her husband, to silence their cruel whispers. But before she could respond, A voice cut through the air, calm and authoritative. "Ladies," Hugh said, stepping forward, his presence commanding attention. "I believe you are disturbing my wife. I suggest you find someone else to torment with your idle gossip." The women, startled by his sudden appearance, fell silent. Their smiles vanished, replaced by expressions of fear and embarrassment. Hugh's gaze was cold, his voice laced with steel. He offered Rosamund his arm, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Come, my lady," he said. "Let us leave these vipers to their own devices." He led her away from the group, his arm a comforting presence at her side. Rosamund felt a surge of gratitude, a warmth that spread through her chest. He had defended her, protected her, silenced the cruel whispers that had threatened to tear them apart. As they walked away, the murmurs of the court faded behind them, replaced by the steady beat of Rosamund's heart, a heart that was beginning to recognize the strength and the unexpected tenderness of the man she had married. The grand hall, with its swirling dancers and glittering chandeliers, seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the two of them, standing together against the whispers and judgments of a world that sought to define them, to limit them, to keep them apart. The silence between them was no longer strained, but filled with a new understanding, a fragile bond forged in the face of adversity. Chapter 5. The Falcon's Flight. The royal hunt was a grand affair, a display of skill and prowess, a chance for the nobles to showcase their wealth and their hunting abilities. Rosamund, though not a seasoned hunter, had always enjoyed riding, and she looked forward to the opportunity to escape the confines of the court, to feel the wind in her hair and the sun on her face. Hugh, a skilled falconer, had brought his prized bird, a magnificent peregrine falcon named Shadow. The morning of the hunt dawned clear and crisp, the air filled with the sounds of baying hounds, the calls of huntsmen, and the excited chatter of the assembled nobles. Rosamund, dressed in a riding habit of deep green velvet, felt a thrill of anticipation as she mounted her horse, a spirited mare named Luna. Hugh, astride his powerful warhorse, looked every bit the noble knight, his falcon perched proudly on his gloved hand. As the hunting party set off, Rosamund found herself riding beside Hugh, their horses keeping pace with each other. The forest was alive with activity, the trees a vibrant tapestry of autumn colors. The air was filled with the scent of pine and damp earth, a welcome change from the perfumed air of the court. Hugh released Shadow, the falcon soaring into the sky, its keen eyes searching for prey. Rosamund watched in awe as the bird circled gracefully, its movements fluid and effortless. She had always been fascinated by falconry, by the bond between man and bird, the trust and understanding that allowed them to work together in such perfect harmony. "He is magnificent," Rosamund said, her voice filled with admiration. Hugh smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his face. He is my most trusted companion." He explained the intricacies of falconry, the years of training, the patience and dedication required to build such a strong bond. Rosamund listened intently, her respect for Hugh growing with each passing moment. She saw a different side of him in the forest, a side that was more relaxed, more open, more alive. As they rode deeper into the forest, the hunting party spread out, each group pursuing their own quarry. Rosamund and Hugh found themselves alone, the sounds of the other hunters fading into the distance. They came to a clearing, a small meadow bathed in sunlight. Hugh dismounted, helping Rosamund down from her horse. "Let us rest here for a while," he said. They tethered their horses and sat beneath a large oak tree, the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant call of a hawk. Rosamund felt a sense of peace, a tranquility she had not experienced since her childhood. She looked at Hugh, his face softened by the dappled sunlight, his eyes reflecting the clear blue sky. "You seem different here, Hugh," she said softly. "More at ease." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "The court, it is a suffocating place. I feel more myself in the open air, closer to nature." He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. "I am not a man of words, Rosamund. I am not good at expressing my feelings. But I want you to know that I appreciate you. I appreciate your strength, your kindness, your spirit. His words, though simple, touched Rosamund deeply. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she was beginning to recognize as affection, perhaps even the beginnings of love. "And I appreciate you, Hugh," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I know you carry a heavy burden, but you carry it with grace and honor. You're a good man, Hugh. A better man than you give yourself credit for." He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek. The touch was tentative, hesitant, but it sent a shiver of electricity through her. His eyes held a question, a plea for understanding. I want to be a good husband to you, Rosamund," he said, his voice low and husky. "I want to make you happy. But I do not know if I am capable of giving you what you deserve." Rosamund placed her hand over his, her fingers interlacing with his. "You are capable of more than you think, Hugh. You just need to let go of the past, to allow yourself to feel." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her face. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the world seemed to fade away. There was only the two of them, surrounded by the beauty of the forest, their hearts beating in unison. He lowered his head, his lips brushing lightly against hers. The kiss was tentative, hesitant, a gentle exploration of unspoken desires. Suddenly, a sharp cry pierced the air. Shadow, the falcon, had returned, a small rabbit clutched in its talons. The spell was broken, the moment shattered. Hugh pulled away, his face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and regret. I apologize, my lady," he said, his voice stammering. "I should not have." Rosamund shook her head, her hand still lingering on his. "There is no need to apologize, Hugh. It was a moment of connection, a moment of truth." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. They remounted their horses, the silence between them no longer awkward, but filled with a new understanding, a fragile promise of what might be. As they rode back towards the hunting party, shadows soared above them, a symbol of their newfound freedom, their tentative steps towards a love that was beginning to take flight. The forest, with its rustling leaves and dappled sunlight, seemed to hold its breath, a silent witness to the fragile bond that was growing between them, a bond that would be tested by the trials and tribulations that awaited them back at the court. Chapter 6. Beneath the banners of war. The fragile peace that had settled over the kingdom was shattered by the sudden eruption of war. A neighboring lord, driven by ambition and greed, launched a surprise attack on the borderlands, his forces sweeping across the countryside, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. King Edric, enraged by the betrayal, summoned his bannermen, calling upon them to defend the realm. Hugh, as a loyal knight of the crown, was among the first to answer the call. He prepared for battle with a grim determination, his demeanor stoic and resolute. Rosamund watched him, her heart filled with a mixture of fear and pride. She knew the dangers he faced, the risks he would take, but she also knew that he was a man of honor, a warrior who would fight bravely for his king and his country. She helped him don his armor, her hands trembling as she fastened the buckles and straps. The cold steel felt alien against her skin, a stark reminder of the violence that awaited him. She looked into his eyes, searching for a sign of fear, a hint of doubt, but she found only a steely resolve, a quiet determination that both comforted and terrified her. "Be careful, Hugh," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Come back to me." He placed a gloved hand on her cheek, his touch surprisingly gentle. "I will, Rosamund. I promise you. I have something to fight for now." His words, though simple, sent a warmth through her chest, a flicker of hope amidst the gathering storm. He leaned down and kissed her, a brief, passionate kiss that spoke volumes of his unspoken feelings. It was a kiss of farewell, a kiss of promise, a kiss that sealed their bond in the face of impending danger. As Hugh rode away with his men-at-arms, their banners flying in the wind, Rosamund watched from the castle walls, her heart pounding in her chest. She prayed for his safety, for his return, for the preservation of the fragile love that had begun to blossom between them. She knew that war was a cruel mistress, that it could take everything away in an instant, but she also knew that she had to be strong, to be brave, to be the woman he needed her to be. The days that followed were filled with anxiety and uncertainty. News from the battlefield trickled in slowly, each report bringing a fresh wave of fear and hope. Rosamund spent her time overseeing the castle's defenses, organizing supplies for the troops, and tending to the wounded who began to arrive from the front lines. She found strength in her duties, in her ability to contribute to the war effort, to support her husband in his absence. She also found solace in the company of the other women of the castle, the wives and mothers of the men who had gone to war. They shared their fears, their hopes, their prayers, finding comfort in their shared experiences. They formed a bond of sisterhood, a network of support that helped them through the long, dark days of waiting. One evening, a messenger arrived from the battlefield, bearing a letter from Hugh. Rosamund's heart leaped with a mixture of excitement and dread as she took the letter, her hands trembling. She recognized Hugh's handwriting, the strong, confident strokes that belied the vulnerability he had shown her in private. She opened the letter and read it aloud to the assembled women, her voice shaking slightly. Hugh wrote of the battles he had fought, the victories he had won, the losses he had suffered. He wrote of the courage of his men, the brutality of the enemy, the horrors of war. But he also wrote of her, of his love for her, of his longing to return home. "My dearest Rosamund," he wrote, "you are my strength, my inspiration, my guiding star. Your love gives me the courage to face the enemy, the will to survive. I fight for you, for our future, for the hope of a life together, a life free from war and strife. I will return to you, my love. I swear it on my honor, on my life." Rosamund's tears flowed freely as she finished reading the letter, her heart overflowing with emotion. The other women wept with her, their tears a mixture of joy and sorrow, of hope and fear. Hugh's words had touched them all, reminding them of the love they shared with their own husbands, their own sons, their own brothers. As the war raged on, Rosamund clung to Hugh's letter, rereading it countless times, drawing strength from his words, from his love. She knew that the future was uncertain, that the outcome of the war was far from decided, but she also knew that she had something worth fighting for, a love that had blossomed amidst the ashes of war, a love that would give her the strength to face whatever the future held. The banners of war, stained with blood and mud, fluttered in the wind, a stark reminder of the conflict that raged, but beneath them, in the hearts of those who waited, a different kind of battle was being fought, a battle for love, for hope, for a future that seemed both distant and impossibly fragile. Chapter 7. Scars of the Past. Weeks turned into months, and the war continued to drag on, its toll heavy on both sides. Rosamund received sporadic letters from Hugh, each one a lifeline, a reassurance that he was still alive, still fighting. But the letters also spoke of the increasing brutality of the conflict, the mounting casualties, the growing sense of despair. One evening, a wounded soldier arrived at the castle, bearing a message from Hugh. He was gravely injured, his body covered in bandages, his face pale and drawn. Rosamund rushed to his side, her heart pounding with fear. "Sir Hugh, is he?" she stammered, unable to voice the question that haunted her. The soldier managed a weak smile. "He lives, my lady. But he is wounded. He sent me to tell you, he needs you." Rosamund felt a surge of relief, followed by a wave of determination. She would go to him, no matter the risks. She gathered supplies, recruited a small escort of trusted guards, and set off for the battlefield, her heart filled with a mixture of dread and anticipation. The journey was arduous and dangerous, the countryside ravaged by war. They passed through burned-out villages, encountered bands of desperate refugees, and witnessed the aftermath of brutal skirmishes. Rosamund, despite her fear, remained resolute, her focus unwavering. She had to reach Hugh, to be by his side, to offer him whatever comfort and support she could. After days of travel, they finally reached the battlefield, a scene of devastation and chaos. Tents were scattered across the landscape, the air filled with the sounds of moaning wounded, the clatter of weapons, and the cries of command. Rosamund, guided by the wounded soldier, searched for Hugh, her heart sinking with each passing moment. She finally found him in a makeshift hospital tent, lying on a cot, his body covered in bandages. His face was pale and gaunt, his eyes closed. He looked broken. Rosamund rushed to his side, her hand reaching out to touch him. "Hugh," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. His eyes fluttered open, his gaze focusing on her with difficulty. A faint smile touched his lips. "Rosamund, you came." "Of course, I came," she said, her voice trembling. "I would never leave you." She examined his wounds, her hands gentle and skilled. He had suffered a deep gash to his leg, a sword wound that had become infected. He was weak, feverish, and in danger of losing his leg, perhaps even his life. Rosamund, drawing on her knowledge of herbs and healing, set to work, cleaning the wound, applying poultices, and administering remedies. She worked tirelessly day and night, tending to his needs, offering him comfort and reassurance. She spoke to him of home, of Whitmore, of their life together, of the future they would share. As she cared for him, she began to learn more about his past, about the scars that went beyond the physical wounds of battle. He spoke of his childhood, of his father's harsh expectations, of his brother's tragic death. He spoke of the guilt he carried, the burden of responsibility he felt, the fear of failure that haunted him. One night, as he lay in a feverish sleep, he began to mutter, his words fragmented and disjointed. "William, I'm sorry I failed you, father. I tried to be." Rosamund held his hand, stroking his brow, trying to soothe him. She realized that he was reliving the trauma of his past, the nightmares that continued to plague him. She whispered words of comfort, of forgiveness, of love. "It's all right, Hugh," she said softly. "You are safe now. You are loved. You have nothing to be ashamed of." Slowly, he began to calm, his breathing becoming more regular, his grip on her hand loosening. He opened his eyes, his gaze focusing on her with a newfound clarity. "Rosamund," he said, his voice weak but steady, "you have shown me what it means to be loved. You have helped me to heal." His words touched her deeply, bringing tears to her eyes. She had come to the battlefield to heal his physical wounds, but she had also begun to heal the wounds of his past, the scars that had marked his soul. As the days passed, Hugh's condition slowly improved. The fever subsided, the infection began to heal, and his strength gradually returned. He was still weak, but he was alive, and he was on the mend. Rosamund remained by his side, her presence a constant source of comfort and support. The scars of the past, though still present, began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of hope, a renewed belief in the possibility of happiness. The battlefield, with its horrors and its devastation, had become a place of healing, a place where two souls had found solace in each other's love, a place where the wounds of the past had begun to give way to the promise of a brighter future. The air, though still filled with the sounds of war, also carried a whisper of hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of love. Chapter 8. A Glimmer of Hope. With Rosamund's constant care and unwavering support, Hugh's recovery progressed steadily. The infection that had threatened his leg and his life receded, leaving behind a jagged scar, a permanent reminder of the battle he had fought, both on the field and within himself. He was still weak, reliant on a crutch to walk, but his spirit was renewed, his eyes reflecting a newfound hope. The tide of the war had begun to turn. King Edric's forces, bolstered by Hugh's earlier victories and the unwavering loyalty of his bannermen, had pushed back the invaders, reclaiming lost territory and securing the borders. News of a possible truce, a negotiated peace, began to circulate through the camp, bringing a sense of cautious optimism. Rosamund, however, remained wary. She had seen the brutality of war, the devastation it wrought, the scars it left behind. She knew that peace was a fragile thing, easily shattered by ambition and greed. She also knew that Hugh's recovery was far from complete. He still suffered from nightmares, from moments of profound sadness, from the lingering guilt that haunted him. One evening, as they sat together outside the hospital tent, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, Rosamund spoke to him about her concerns. "Hugh," she said softly, "I am grateful for your recovery, for the prospect of peace. But I fear that you are still carrying a heavy burden. You still blame yourself for William's death." Hugh looked away, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "It is difficult to let go of the past, Rosamund. It is a part of me, a scar that I will always carry." "But scars can heal, Hugh," Rosamund insisted. "They may remain, but they do not have to define you. You have shown such strength, such courage, both on the battlefield and in your recovery. You have proven that you are capable of moving forward." He turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. "You give me strength, Rosamund. You give me hope. You have shown me that I am worthy of love, of happiness." He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek. "Before I met you, I was lost, adrift in a sea of darkness. You brought me back to the light. You showed me that there was still beauty in the world, still something worth fighting for." Rosamund leaned into his touch, her heart overflowing with emotion. "And you have shown me the same, Hugh. You have shown me the strength of your heart, the depth of your character, the beauty of your soul." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. I love you, Hugh. I love you not despite your scars, but because of them. They are a part of you, a testament to your strength, your resilience, your capacity for growth." His eyes widened, his expression a mixture of surprise and disbelief. He had longed to hear those words, to feel that love, but he had also feared that he was unworthy of it. "Rosamund," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. I love you too. More than words can say. You have saved me." He leaned in and kissed her, a slow, tender kiss that sealed their bond, their commitment to each other. It was a kiss of hope, a kiss of healing, a kiss that spoke of a future free from the shadows of the past. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield, Rosamund and Hugh sat together, their hands clasped tightly, their hearts filled with a fragile hope. The war was not yet over. The future was still uncertain, but they had found something precious, something worth fighting for, a love that had blossomed amidst the devastation, a love that had the power to heal, to transform, to bring light to even the darkest of nights. The glimmer of hope, once faint and distant, now shone brightly, illuminating their path forward, a path that would lead them away from the battlefield, towards a future filled with the promise of peace, of happiness, of a love that would endure the trials and tribulations that lay ahead. The silence around them was broken only by the gentle whisper of the wind, a sound that seemed to carry a promise of a new dawn, a new beginning, a new life built on the foundations of love, trust, and a shared hope for a brighter tomorrow. Chapter 9. The Serpent's Kiss. The truce was declared, and a tentative peace settled over the kingdom. Hugh, still recovering from his wounds, was granted leave to return to Whitmore, accompanied by Rosamund. The journey back was slow and arduous, Hugh's legs still causing him considerable pain, but their spirits were high, buoyed by the prospect of returning home, of rebuilding their lives together. Upon their arrival at Whitmore, they were greeted with a mixture of relief and celebration. The castle staff, the villagers, the men-at-arms who had remained behind all welcomed them with open arms, their faces etched with joy and gratitude. Rosamund, however, noticed a subtle undercurrent of tension, a hint of unease that she couldn't quite place. Alara, her old nurse, was among the first to greet them, her embrace warm and comforting. But as Rosamund pulled away, she noticed a flicker of concern in Alara's eyes. "My lady," Alara said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "There are whispers. Rumors." Rosamund's heart sank. "What rumors, Alara?" Alara hesitated, her gaze darting around the courtyard. "They say Sir Hugh is weakened. That he is no longer the warrior he once was. That he is unfit to rule." Rosamund felt a surge of anger, a fierce protectiveness towards her husband. That is nonsense, Alara. Hugh is recovering. He will regain his strength. Alara nodded, but her expression remained troubled. There are those who would seek to take advantage of his vulnerability. Your cousin, Lord Edmund, he has been asking questions. Lord Edmund, Rosamund's ambitious and unscrupulous cousin, had always been a source of concern. He had long coveted Whitmore, its lands and its resources, and he had never been shy about expressing his disdain for Rosamund's marriage to Hugh, a man he considered an outsider, a threat to his own ambitions. Rosamund's suspicions were confirmed a few days later, when Edmund arrived at Whitmore, ostensibly to offer his congratulations on Hugh's return and to express his concern for his well-being. He was accompanied by a retinue of armed men, their presence a subtle display of power, a veiled threat. Edmund greeted Rosamund with a forced smile, his eyes cold and calculating. "My dear cousin," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "it is so good to see you again. And Sir Hugh, I am relieved to see that he is recovering from his unfortunate injury." Hugh, leaning heavily on his crutch, met Edmund's gaze with a steely resolve. "My recovery is progressing well, Lord Edmund. I will soon be back to full strength." Edmund's smile widened, but it did not reach his eyes. "I am sure you will. But in the meantime, I am concerned about the stability of Whitmore. The war has taken its toll, and there are rumors of unrest. I would be happy to offer my assistance to ensure that order is maintained." Rosamund saw through Edmund's thinly veiled attempt to seize control of Whitmore. He was using Hugh's injury as an excuse to undermine his authority, to sow seeds of doubt and discontent among the people. "Thank you for your concern, cousin," Rosamund said, her voice firm and unwavering. "But Whitmore is perfectly stable. Sir Hugh and I are quite capable of managing our own affairs." Edmund's expression hardened, his mask of civility slipping. "Perhaps. But it is always wise to have allies, to have friends in high places, especially in these uncertain times." He let his gaze linger on Rosamund, his eyes filled with a mixture of lust and ambition. "You are a beautiful woman, Rosamund. A woman of influence. You could be a valuable asset to the right man." Hugh stepped forward, interposing. "My wife needs no other man," he growled. Edmund turned with a shrug. "As you wish. For now." Edmund and his retinue departed, leaving behind an atmosphere of tension and unease. Rosamund knew that he was a dangerous enemy, a serpent lurking in the shadows, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. She also knew that she and Hugh would have to be vigilant, to be strong, to protect their home, their people, and their love from his treacherous schemes. The kiss of the serpent, though subtle, had left its venomous mark, a warning of the dangers that lay ahead, a challenge that they would have to face together, united in their determination to defend their home and their love against the shadows that threatened to engulf them. The walls of Whitmore, once a symbol of safety and security, now felt like a fragile barrier against the storm that was brewing, a storm fueled by ambition, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of power. Chapter 10. Trials of Loyalty. Edmund's visit had cast a long shadow over Whitmore. His veiled threats and thinly disguised ambitions had sown seeds of doubt and unease among the castle staff and the villagers. Rumors continued to circulate, fueled by Edmund's whispers, questioning Hugh's ability to rule, his fitness to defend Whitmore against its enemies. Rosamund, acutely aware of the danger, took it upon herself to bolster morale and to reassure the people of Hugh's strength and his commitment to their well-being. She organized feasts, distributed gifts, and made herself visible throughout the estate, her presence a constant reminder of their lord and lady's unwavering dedication. Hugh, despite his physical limitations, also worked tirelessly to regain the trust and confidence of his people. He resumed his duties as Lord of Whitmore, overseeing the day-to-day affairs of the estate, dispensing justice, and planning for the future. He trained with his men-at-arms, pushing himself to his limits, determined to regain his former strength and to prove his fitness to lead. One evening, a group of villagers, led by a respected elder named Thomas, approached Rosamund with a request. They were concerned about the rumors, about Edmund's ambitions, and about the safety of Whitmore. "My lady," Thomas said, his voice trembling slightly, "we are loyal to Sir Hugh, to you. But we are afraid. We have heard the whispers. We have seen Lord Edmund's men. We fear for our homes, for our families." Rosamund met his gaze, her expression firm and reassuring. "I understand your fears," she said. "But I assure you, Sir Hugh, and I will not allow Lord Edmund to harm you. We will defend Whitmore. We will protect our people, no matter the cost." She paused, her voice gaining strength. "I know that Sir Hugh has been wounded, that he is still recovering, but his spirit is unbroken. He is a warrior, a leader, a man of honor. He will not abandon you. He will not betray your trust." Thomas nodded, his expression reflecting a renewed sense of hope. "We believe you, my lady. We trust you. We will stand with you, with Sir Hugh, against any enemy." Rosamund's words, her unwavering commitment, had a profound effect on the villagers. They returned to their homes, their fears allayed, their loyalty reaffirmed. But Rosamund knew that words alone were not enough. She had to prove to them, to everyone, that he was still a force to be reckoned with, that he was still capable of defending Whitmore against any threat. She devised a plan, a bold and daring strategy that would test Hugh's strength, his courage, and his leadership. She proposed a tournament, a grand display of martial prowess, a chance for Hugh to demonstrate his skills and to silence his detractors. Hugh, initially hesitant, eventually agreed to her plan. He knew that it was a risk, that failure could be disastrous, but he also knew that it was necessary. He had to prove to himself, to his people, to Rosamund, that he was still the warrior he once was, that he was still worthy of their trust and their loyalty. The tournament was announced, and invitations were sent to neighboring lords and knights. The news spread quickly, generating excitement and anticipation throughout the region. Edmund, predictably, accepted the invitation, his eyes gleaming with anticipation, sensing an opportunity to exploit Hugh's perceived weakness. The day of the tournament arrived, and the grounds of Whitmore were transformed into a scene of vibrant color and bustling activity. Banners fluttered in the wind, tents were erected, and crowds of spectators gathered, their faces filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Hugh, dressed in his armor, his legs still causing him pain, entered the arena, his appearance greeted with a mixture of cheers and murmurs. He knew that all eyes were on him, that his every move would be scrutinized, judged, and analyzed. He drew strength from Rosamund's presence, from her unwavering belief in him, from her love. The tournament began, and Hugh faced a series of challenges, each one designed to test his strength, his skill, and his endurance. He fought with sword and lance, with axe and mace, his movements deliberate and precise, his determination unwavering. He defeated opponent after opponent, his victories silencing his detractors, his courage inspiring his supporters. But the final challenge, the one that would determine the ultimate victor, was a duel against Edmund himself. Edmund, a skilled and ruthless warrior, was confident of victory, his eyes filled with a cold, predatory gleam. He saw this as his chance to humiliate Hugh, to destroy his reputation, to pave the way for his own takeover of Whitmore. Rosamund, standing at the barrier, held her breath.
Hugh met Edmund.
The trials of loyalty, the whispers of doubt, the weight of expectations all culminated in this final confrontation, a battle not just for victory, but for survival, for the future of Whitmore, for the preservation of their love. The clash of steel echoed through the arena, a sound that would determine the fate of two men, two families, two destinies, bound together by a tangled web of ambition, betrayal, and the unwavering power of love. Chapter 11. The Price of Freedom. The duel between Hugh and Edmund was a brutal, relentless affair. Both men were skilled warriors, their movements honed by years of training and experience. But Edmund fought with a savage fury, fueled by ambition and a desperate desire to prove his superiority. Hugh, still recovering from his injury, fought with a quiet determination, his movements deliberate and precise, his focus unwavering. The crowd watched in breathless silence, their faces etched with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Rosamund, standing at the edge of the arena, her heart pounding in her chest, could barely breathe. She knew that this was more than just a tournament, more than just a display of martial prowess. This was a battle for survival, a fight for the future of Whitmore, for the preservation of their love. Edmund, sensing an advantage, pressed his attack, his sword a blur of motion, his strikes aimed with deadly precision. Hugh, despite his pain, parried and defended, his movements graceful and efficient, his shield deflecting Edmund's blows. But he was tiring, his leg weakening, his strength ebbing. Rosamund saw the strain on Hugh's face, the beads of sweat that trickled down his brow, the slight tremor in his hand. She knew that he could not sustain this pace, that he was nearing his limit. She feared for his safety, for his life, but she also knew that he would not yield, that he would fight to the bitter end. Edmund, sensing his opportunity, launched a fierce attack, his sword aimed at Hugh's injured leg. Hugh, anticipating the blow, sidestepped, but he stumbled, his leg giving way beneath him. He fell to one knee, his sword slipping from his grasp. Edmund stood over him, his sword raised, his face twisted in a triumphant sneer. "It is over, Fitzallen," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Whitmore is mine," Rosamund cried out, her voice a desperate plea. "Hugh." But Hugh, despite his pain, despite his exhaustion, refused to surrender. He looked up at Edmund, his eyes filled with a steely resolve, a quiet defiance. He may have been wounded, he may have been weakened, but he was not defeated. He reached for a small dagger, concealed in his boot, his movements swift and unexpected. Edmund, caught off guard, hesitated for a split second, his eyes widening in surprise. It was all the time Hugh needed. He lunged forward, his dagger striking true, piercing Edmund's armor, finding its mark beneath his ribs. Edmund gasped, his eyes widening in disbelief, his sword clattering to the ground. He staggered backward, his hand clutching at the wound, his face draining of color. The crowd erupted in a cacophony of cheers and shouts, their voices a mixture of relief and disbelief. Rosamund rushed to Hugh's side, her arms embracing him, her tears flowing freely. "Hugh," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You did it. You won." He leaned against her, his body trembling with exhaustion, his face pale and drawn. "It was not a victory, Rosamund," he said, his voice weak but steady. "It was survival." Edmund, his strength ebbing, collapsed to the ground, his lifeblood staining the sand. His ambition, his treachery, his relentless pursuit of power had ended in a single, fatal blow. The tournament was over, the duel decided, the thread extinguished. But the price of freedom, the cost of victory, was heavy. Hugh had proven his strength, his courage, his leadership, but he had also been forced to take a life, to kill a man, a member of his own family. As the crowd dispersed, their cheers fading into the distance, Rosamund helped Hugh to his feet, her arms supporting him, her love sustaining him. They walked away from the arena, their steps slow and deliberate, their bodies weary, their spirits burdened by the weight of what had transpired. The price of freedom had been paid, the victory secured, but the scars of the battle, both physical and emotional, would remain, a constant reminder of the challenges they had overcome, the sacrifices they had made, the love that had sustained them through it all. The silence that surrounded them was broken only by the gentle whisper of the wind, a sound that seemed to carry a lament for the fallen, a tribute to the courage of the victor, and a promise of a future that would be forever marked by the events of that fateful day. Chapter 12. Echoes in the Chapel. The aftermath of the tournament was a period of quiet reflection, of healing and recovery. Hugh, though victorious, was deeply affected by Edmund's death. He had taken a life, a member of his own family, and the weight of that act pressed heavily upon him. He spent hours in the castle chapel, seeking solace in prayer, grappling with the moral implications of his actions. Rosamund, understanding his turmoil, remained by his side, offering him comfort and support, her presence a constant reminder of the love that bound them together. She knew that he was a good man, a man of honor, but she also knew that he was burdened by the expectations of his role, by the demands of leadership, by the ever-present threat of violence. One evening, as they sat together in the chapel, the only light coming from the flickering candles that illuminated the stained glass windows, Rosamund spoke to him about her concerns. "Hugh," she said softly, "I know that you are troubled. I know that you are struggling with what happened. But you must not blame yourself. You did what you had to do. You defended your home, your people, your love." Hugh looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. "It is not so simple, Rosamund. I took a life. I ended a man's existence. That is a burden I will always carry." "But you did it to protect others," Rosamund insisted. "You did it to prevent further bloodshed, to prevent Edmund from seizing control of Whitmore, from harming your people." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the crucifix that hung above the altar. "I know, but it does not ease the weight. It does not silence the echoes." He paused, his voice trembling slightly. "I hear his voice, Rosamund. I see his face. I relive the moment over and over again." Rosamund reached out, her hand gently touching his. "You are not alone, Hugh. I am here for you. We will face this together. We will find a way to heal, to move forward." She paused, her voice gaining strength. "You are a good man, Hugh. A just man. You did what was necessary, what was right. You must not let the darkness consume you. You must not let the echoes silence the music of your heart." Her words, her unwavering belief in him, touched him deeply. He leaned into her touch, his hand gripping hers tightly. He closed his eyes, seeking solace in her presence, in her love. "I want to be worthy of you, Rosamund," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I want to be the man you believe me to be. But I fear that I am broken beyond repair." Rosamund shook her head, her eyes filled with tears. "You are not broken, Hugh. You are wounded, yes, but you are also strong. You are resilient. You have overcome so much. You will overcome this too." She leaned closer, her lips brushing lightly against his. "I love you, Hugh. I love you with all my heart. And I will never leave your side. We will face this together always." The kiss was a promise, a vow, a testament to the enduring power of their love. It was a kiss of healing, a kiss of hope, a kiss that sought to silence the echoes of the past, to bring light to the darkness that threatened to engulf them. As they sat together in the chapel, the flickering candles casting dancing shadows on the stone walls, Rosamund and Hugh found solace in each other's presence, in their shared faith, in their unwavering love. The echoes of the past, though still present, began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of peace, a renewed belief in the possibility of redemption, of healing, of a future free from the shadows that had haunted them for so long. The chapel, with its stained glass windows and its sacred silence, became a sanctuary, a place of refuge, a place where two souls could find solace and strength in each other's love, a love that would guide them through the darkness and lead them towards the light. The air, though filled with the scent of incense and beeswax, also carried a whisper of hope, a promise of a new dawn, a new beginning, a new life built on the foundations of forgiveness, compassion, and the enduring power of the human spirit. Chapter 13. The Unveiling. Spring arrived at Whitmore, bringing with it a sense of renewal and rebirth. The snow melted, the trees blossomed, and the land came alive with vibrant colors and the sounds of nature. Rosamund, inspired by the changing season, decided to organize a spring festival, a celebration of life and hope, a chance for the people of Whitmore to put the darkness of the past behind them and to look forward to a brighter future. She worked tirelessly, planning every detail, overseeing the preparations, ensuring that the festival would be a joyous and memorable occasion. She wanted to create a sense of unity, of community, to bring people together, to remind them of the beauty and the bounty of their land. Hugh, though still recovering from his emotional wounds, supported Rosamund's efforts wholeheartedly. He saw the festival as an opportunity to reconnect with his people, to show them that he was still their lord, their protector, their friend. He also saw it as a way to honor Rosamund's strength, her resilience, her unwavering commitment to Whitmore and its people. As the day of the festival approached, a sense of excitement and anticipation filled the air. Villagers decorated their homes with flowers and ribbons, the castle staff prepared a lavish feast, and musicians practiced their songs, their melodies echoing through the courtyard. On the morning of the festival, Rosamund awoke to the sound of birdsong, her heart filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She dressed in a gown of pale green silk, embroidered with silver threads, her hair adorned with wildflowers. She wanted to look her best, to represent the spirit of spring, the promise of new beginnings. As she walked through the castle, she noticed a small, wooden chest tucked away in a corner of the library. It was an old chest, one she had not seen before, its surface covered in dust and cobwebs. Curiosity piqued, she knelt down and opened it. Inside, she found a collection of letters, carefully tied together with a faded ribbon. The handwriting on the letters was unfamiliar, but as she began to read them, she realized that they were written by Hugh's mother, Lady Eleanor, to a man named Lord Alaric. The letters were filled with passionate declarations of love, with expressions of longing and desire, with plans for a future together. Rosamund's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the implications of what she was reading. Lady Eleanor, Hugh's mother, had been in love with another man, a man who was not her husband. As she continued to read, she discovered a shocking truth. Lord Alaric was not just a lover, he was also Hugh's true father. Hugh was not the son of the stern, unyielding Lord Fitzalan, the man who had raised him, the man who had driven his brother to suicide. He was the son of a man who had loved his mother deeply, a man who had shared her passion for poetry, for music, for life. Rosamund felt a wave of emotions wash over her: shock, disbelief, confusion, and a profound sense of empathy for Hugh. She understood now the source of his inner conflict, the reason he had always felt like an outsider, the reason he had struggled to reconcile his gentle nature with the harsh expectations of his upbringing. A noise behind her startled her. It was Hugh. "What is that?" he asked. Rosamund closed the chest. She stood, holding her breath. Here, hidden for years, lay an explosive truth, a secret that could shatter the foundations of Hugh's identity, his understanding of his past, his place in the world. The spring festival, with its promise of joy and renewal, suddenly seemed a distant concern, overshadowed by the weight of this revelation, a revelation that Rosamund knew she had to share with Hugh, no matter the consequences. The air, filled with the scent of wildflowers and the sounds of celebration, also carried a whisper of uncertainty, a premonition of the storm that was about to break, a storm that would test their love, their strength, their resilience, in ways they could never have imagined. The unveiling of this long-hidden secret would change everything, forcing them to confront the truth, to grapple with the implications, to decide whether to embrace the past or to bury it forever. Chapter 14. Storm of Swords. Rosamund knew she couldn't keep the contents of the letters a secret from Hugh. It was his history, his truth, and he deserved to know, no matter how painful it might be. But she also knew that the revelation could shatter him, could unravel the fragile peace he had found. She waited until the festivities of the spring festival were over, until the guests had departed and the castle had fallen silent. She found Hugh in the library, the very room where she had discovered the letters. He was standing by the window, gazing out at the moonlit landscape, his expression pensive and withdrawn. She approached him quietly, her heart heavy with the weight of what she was about to reveal. "Hugh," she said softly, "there is something I need to tell you. Something I discovered today." He turned to her, his eyes questioning, his brow furrowed with concern. "What is it, Rosamund? What is troubling you?" She hesitated, her voice trembling slightly. I found some old letters in a chest in the library. They were written by your mother." His expression changed, a flicker of surprise, followed by a wave of sadness. He had rarely spoken of his mother, and Rosamund knew that her memory was a source of both pain and longing. "My mother?" he said, his voice barely a whisper. "But what did they say?" Rosamund took a deep breath, steeling herself for the difficult task ahead. They were love letters, Hugh, written to a man named Lord Alaric. Hugh's eyes widened, his expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Love letters? To another man? But my father. Rosamund placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle and reassuring. The letters, they reveal that Lord Alaric was your true father, Hugh. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable, a truth that shattered the foundations of Hugh's identity. He staggered backward, his hand flying to his mouth, his eyes filled with shock and disbelief. No, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion.
It cannot be.
My father, he raised me, he trained me, he was not your blood, Hugh, Rosamund said softly. But he was the only father you knew. He shaped you, he molded you, but he did not create you. Hugh shook his head, his mind reeling, struggling to comprehend the enormity of the revelation. His entire life, his understanding of his past, his sense of self, had been turned upside down.
But why?
Why did she keep it a secret? He asked, his voice trembling. Rosamund explained what she had learned from the letters, about Lady Eleanor's love for Lord Alaric, about their plans for a future together, about the circumstances that had prevented them from being together. As Hugh listened, his emotions shifted from shock and disbelief to anger and resentment. He felt betrayed by his mother, by his father, by everyone who had kept this secret from him. He felt like a fraud, a stranger in his own life, a man without a true identity. It is a lie, he said, his voice rising in anger. My whole life a lie. I am not a Fitzallen. I am nothing. He turned away from Rosamund, his body shaking with rage and grief. He paced the room, his fists clenched, his mind consumed by a storm of conflicting emotions. Rosamund watched him, her heart aching for him. She knew that she had unleashed a torrent of pain, but she also knew that she had done the right thing. Hugh deserved to know the truth, no matter how difficult it was. All this time, William. Hugh stopped. He faced the wall. I hated him for something that was me all along. He punched the wall hard. Rosamund winced. He turned, holding his bruised hand. His eyes once again held tears. It changes nothing of who you are,
she said.
He shook his head. The storm of swords, the battle for his identity, had begun, and Rosamund knew that she would have to be his shield, his anchor, his guiding light, as he navigated the treacherous waters of his past, as he sought to find his true self amidst the wreckage of his former life. The library, with its silent books and its flickering candlelight, became a battlefield, a place where the truth would be confronted, where the past would be reckoned with, where the future would be forged, one painful step at a time. Chapter 15. A Promise Broken. The revelation of his true parentage had a profound impact on Hugh. He became withdrawn, distant, his joy extinguished, his spirit broken. He spent hours alone, wandering the castle grounds, lost in thought, grappling with the shattered remnants of his identity. He avoided Rosamund, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and resentment, as if she were somehow responsible for the upheaval in his life. Rosamund, heartbroken by his withdrawal, tried to reach out to him, to offer him comfort and support, but her efforts were met with silence, with a coldness that chilled her to the bone. She understood his pain, his confusion, his anger, but she also feared that he was slipping away from her, that the love they had shared was being consumed by the shadows of the past. One evening, as she sat alone in their chamber, the silence broken only by the crackling of the fire in the hearth, Hugh entered, his expression grim, his eyes filled with a steely resolve. He had made a decision that would change their lives forever. Rosamund, he said, his voice cold and distant, I am leaving Whitmore. Rosamund's heart sank. She had feared this, had sensed his growing detachment, but to hear the words spoken aloud, to see the finality in his eyes, was devastating. Leaving? She whispered, her voice trembling. But where will you go? What will you do? He turned away from her, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames. I do not know. I need to define myself, to understand who I am. I cannot do that here, surrounded by the lies of my past. But what about us, Hugh? Rosamund pleaded, her voice choked with emotion. What about our love? What about our life together? He turned back to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and regret. I do not know if I am capable of love, Rosamund. Not anymore. Not after everything. I am broken, damaged. I do not want to hurt you. But you are not broken, Hugh, Rosamund insisted, her voice rising in desperation. You are wounded, yes, but you are also strong. You are resilient. We can heal together. We can overcome this. He shook his head, his expression unwavering. I cannot. I need to do this alone. I need to find my own path, my own truth. I cannot be the man you want me to be, the man you deserve. I am not a Fitzallen. I am nothing. That is not true. Rosamund cried. You are Hugh, the man I love, the man I married. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. I am sorry, Rosamund. I am so sorry. But I cannot stay. I must go. He turned and walked towards the door, his steps heavy and deliberate. Rosamund watched him, her heart shattering into a million pieces. She wanted to run after him, to beg him to stay, but she knew that it was futile. He had made his decision, and she could not change his mind. As he reached the door, he paused, his hand resting on the latch. He looked back at her, his eyes filled with a lingering trace of the love they had shared, a love that was now being torn apart by the weight of the past. Goodbye, Rosamund, he said, his voice barely a whisper. And then he was gone, leaving Rosamund alone in the empty chamber, her dreams shattered, her heart broken, her future uncertain. The promise they had made to each other, the vow they had taken, had been broken, torn asunder by the revelation of a long-hidden secret. The fire in the hearth continued to crackle, its flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, a silent witness to the devastation, to the loss, to the end of a love that had once seemed so strong, so enduring. The silence that filled the room was broken only by the sound of Rosamund's sobs, a lament for a love lost, a future shattered, a promise broken, a heart irrevocably wounded. The weight of his absence pressed down on her, a suffocating reminder of the emptiness that now filled her life, an emptiness that seemed to stretch out before her, vast and unending, a bleak landscape devoid of hope, of joy, of the man she had loved with all her heart. Chapter 16. The Raven's Omen. The days and weeks that followed Hugh's departure were a blur of grief and despair for Rosamund. She wandered the castle like a ghost, haunted by his memory, by the echoes of their love, by the shattered remnants of their dreams. She avoided the places they had shared, the library, the chapel, the gardens, unable to bear the constant reminders of his absence. Alara, her old nurse, tried to comfort her, to offer her solace, but Rosamund was inconsolable. She had lost everything, her husband, her love, her future, and she saw no way forward, no path out of the darkness that had engulfed her. One morning, as she sat alone in her chamber, staring out at the gray, overcast sky, she noticed a raven perched on the windowsill. It was a large bird, its feathers black as night, its eyes gleaming with an unnerving intelligence. It stared at her for a long moment, its gaze intense and unwavering, and then it let out a harsh, mournful cry, a sound that sent a shiver of dread down Rosamund's spine. She had always been superstitious, believing in omens and portents, and she knew that the raven was a symbol of ill fortune, of death, of impending doom. She felt a sense of foreboding, a premonition that something terrible was about to happen. Her fears were confirmed a few days later, when a messenger arrived at Whitmore, bearing grim news. He was a soldier, his clothes stained with blood and mud, his face etched with exhaustion and grief. "My lady," he said, his voice trembling, I bring news of Sir Hugh." Rosamund's heart leaped into her throat. She had not heard from Hugh since his departure, and she had feared the worst. She braced herself for the blow, for the inevitable confirmation of her deepest fears. He is dead, my lady," the soldier said, his voice barely a whisper. He was ambushed by a band of outlaws. He fought bravely, but he was outnumbered. He did not survive. Rosamund felt the world spin around her. She staggered backward, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes widening in disbelief. It could not be true. Hugh could not be dead. He was strong. He was a warrior. He was her love. No, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. It cannot be. It is a lie. The soldier shook his head, his eyes filled with tears. I saw it with my own eyes, my lady. I was there. I tried to help him, but it was too late. He handed her a small, blood-stained pouch, its contents spilling onto the floor. It was Hugh's signet ring, the one he had always worn, the one that had symbolized their bond, their marriage, their love. Rosamund picked up the ring, her hands trembling. She recognized it instantly, the familiar weight of it, the intricate design of the falcon, the symbol of his house, of his identity, of everything he had been. She clutched the ring to her chest, her tears flowing freely, her body shaking with uncontrollable sobs. Hugh was gone. Her love was dead. Her world had ended. The raven's omen had come true. The prophecy of doom had been fulfilled. The darkness had consumed her, leaving her alone in a world of grief and despair, a world without hope, without joy, without the man she had loved with all her heart. The castle walls, once a refuge, now felt like a prison, a tomb, a constant reminder of her loss, of her shattered dreams, of the future that would never be. The silence that surrounded her was broken only by the sound of her own weeping, a lament for a love lost, a life cut short, a destiny unfulfilled. The raven, perched once more on the windowsill, let out another mournful cry, a sound that seemed to echo the emptiness in Rosamund's heart, an emptiness that would never be filled, a wound that would never heal. Chapter 17. Paths Diverging. The news of Hugh's death spread quickly throughout the kingdom, reaching the ears of King Edric and his royal court. The king, saddened by the loss of one of his most loyal and valiant knights, sent a message of condolence to Rosamund, offering her his sympathy and his support. He also sent a summons, requesting her presence at court, ostensibly to discuss the future of Whitmore and its strategic importance to the realm. Rosamund, still reeling from the shock of Hugh's death, was reluctant to leave Whitmore, to abandon the place where she had shared so many memories with him, the place where his spirit still lingered. But she knew that she had a duty to her people, to her family, to the legacy of her husband. She had to be strong, to be resolute, to face the challenges that lay ahead. She prepared for the journey with a heavy heart, her grief a constant companion, her future uncertain. She packed her belongings, selected a small escort of trusted guards, and said goodbye to Alara, her old nurse, her only remaining confidant. As she rode away from Whitmore, she looked back at the castle, its walls silhouetted against the gray sky, its towers reaching towards the heavens. It was a place of both joy and sorrow, of love and loss, of hope and despair. It was her home, but it was also a reminder of everything she had lost, of everything that would never be. The journey to the royal court was long and arduous, but Rosamund found a strange sense of solace in the solitude, in the rhythm of the horses' hooves, in the changing landscapes. She had time to reflect, to grieve, to come to terms with the reality of Hugh's death, to begin to plan for her own future, a future that would be very different from the one she had envisioned. Upon her arrival at the royal court, she was greeted with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. The courtiers, the nobles, the ladies in waiting all whispered about her tragic loss, about her uncertain future. She felt like an object of pity, a widow in mourning, a pawn in the game of power. King Edric received her with kindness and respect, expressing his condolences and offering her his support. But he also made it clear that he had expectations of her, that he expected her to remain loyal to the crown, to ensure the stability of Whitmore and its continued contribution to the realm. He also introduced her to Lord Kesteven, a powerful and influential nobleman, a widower himself, a man who was seeking a new wife, a new alliance. Rosamund recognized the unspoken implication, the subtle pressure to remarry, to secure her position, to ensure the future of Whitmore through another strategic union. But Rosamund was not ready to remarry, not ready to replace Hugh, not ready to abandon the memory of their love. She had loved him deeply, and his death had left a void in her heart that could never be filled. She politely but firmly resisted Lord Castivan's advances, making it clear that she was not interested in marriage, that she intended to remain independent, to rule Whitmore in her own right. Her decision surprised and angered many at court, including King Edric himself. They saw her as a foolish, sentimental woman, unwilling to accept the realities of her situation, unwilling to play the game of power. They whispered about her stubbornness, about her lack of practicality. But Rosamund was determined to forge her own path, to make her own choices, to live her life on her own terms. She had lost her husband, her love, but she had not lost her spirit, her strength, her resolve. She would honor Hugh's memory by ruling Whitmore wisely and justly, by protecting her people, by remaining true to herself. As she stood alone in the grand hall of the royal court, surrounded by the whispers and the judgments of the courtiers, Rosamund realized that her path had diverged from the one she had expected to follow. She was no longer a wife, no longer a partner, no longer bound by the expectations of others. She was a widow, a ruler, a woman alone, forging her own destiny, charting her own course, navigating the treacherous waters of the court with courage and determination. The paths of love and duty had diverged, leaving her standing at a crossroads, facing an uncertain future, but also embracing a newfound freedom, a chance to define herself, to shape her own life, to create her own legacy. The echoes of the past still lingered, but they no longer held her captive. She was free to choose her own path, to embrace her own destiny, to become the woman she was meant to be. Chapter 18. The Heart's Reckoning. Rosamund's defiance of the court's expectations, her refusal to remarry, and her determination to rule Whitmore on her own, created a ripple of unease among the nobles. They saw her as a threat to the established order, a woman who dared to challenge the traditional roles assigned to her gender. They whispered about her, plotted against her, sought ways to undermine her authority, to bring her to heel. King Edric, though initially sympathetic to Rosamund's grief, grew increasingly frustrated by her intransigence. He needed Whitmore's loyalty, its resources, its strategic position, and he saw Rosamund's independence as a potential obstacle to his plans. He summoned her to his private chambers, intending to reason with her, to persuade her to reconsider her decision, to accept the necessity of a new alliance. "Lady Rosamund," he said, his voice firm but not unkind, "I understand your grief, your reluctance to remarry. But you must be practical. You are a woman alone, ruling a large and important estate. You need a strong ally, a protector, a man who can ensure the stability of Whitmore." Rosamund met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I am capable of ruling Whitmore on my own, Your Majesty. I have proven that. I do not need a man to protect me, to make decisions for me. I am the rightful ruler of Whitmore, and I will not relinquish my authority." King Edric sighed, his patience wearing thin. "You are being foolish, Rosamund. You are playing a dangerous game. There are those who would seek to take advantage of your vulnerability. There are those who would challenge your right to rule. Let them try," Rosamund said, her voice filled with a quiet defiance. "I will not be intimidated. I will not be bullied. I will defend Whitmore. I will protect my people, no matter the cost." The king studied her for a long moment, his eyes assessing her strength, her determination, her resolve. He saw in her a spirit that he had not expected, a courage that he could not ignore. He realized that he had underestimated her, that she was not a weak, sentimental woman, but a force to be reckoned with. "Very well, Rosamund," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I will respect your decision, but I will also hold you accountable. You will be responsible for the safety and security of Whitmore. You will answer to me for any failures." Rosamund nodded, accepting his terms. "I understand, Your Majesty. I will not disappoint you." She left the king's chambers, her head held high, her heart filled with a mixture of defiance and apprehension. She had won a temporary victory, but she knew that the battle was far from over. She would have to be vigilant, to be strong, to prove to everyone that she was capable of ruling Whitmore on her own, that she was worthy of the trust and the loyalty of her people. As she walked through the corridors of the royal castle, she encountered Lord Kesteven, the nobleman who had sought her hand in marriage. He approached her with a smug smile, his eyes filled with a mixture of disdain and amusement. "So, Lady Rosamond," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "you have chosen to defy the king, to reject my offer, to remain a lonely widow. You are a foolish woman. You will regret this decision." Rosamond met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I do not regret my decision, Lord Kesteven. I am not afraid of you, or of anyone else. I will rule Whitmore on my own terms, and I will not be swayed by your threats or your insults." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, his face contorted in anger and frustration. She knew that she had made an enemy, but she did not care. She had made her choice, she had chosen her path, and she would not be deterred. As she returned to her chambers, she realized that she was facing a reckoning, a moment of truth. She had to decide what kind of ruler she wanted to be, what kind of life she wanted to live, what kind of legacy she wanted to leave behind. She had to confront her own fears, her own doubts, her own insecurities, and to find the strength within herself to overcome them. The heart's reckoning was a painful, but necessary, process. It was a time of introspection, of self-discovery, of transformation. It was a time to confront the past, to embrace the present, and to forge a new future, a future that would be defined by her own choices, her own actions, her own unwavering determination to be the woman she was meant to be, a woman of strength, of courage, of independence, a woman who would rule her own destiny, a woman who would honor the memory of her lost love by living a life of purpose, of meaning, of unwavering commitment to her people and her land. The corridors of the castle, with their shadows and their whispers, became a crucible, a place where her spirit would be tested, where her resolve would be strengthened, where her true self would emerge, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the unwavering power of her own will. Chapter 19. Flames of Redemption. Rosamond returned to Whitmore, determined to prove herself a capable and just ruler. She threw herself into the work of governing, overseeing the estate, dispensing justice, and ensuring the well-being of her people. She worked tirelessly, from dawn till dusk, her dedication earning her the respect and admiration of those who had doubted her. She also implemented reforms, improving the lives of the villagers, promoting trade, and strengthening the castle's defenses. She was a fair and compassionate ruler, listening to the concerns of her people, addressing their grievances, and striving to create a more equitable and prosperous society. But the shadows of the past still lingered. The whispers of her enemies still echoed in the halls of power. Lord Kesteven, smarting from her ejection, continued to plot against her, seeking allies among the disgruntled nobles, spreading rumors and sowing seeds of discontent. One evening, as Rosamond worked late in the library, reviewing documents and planning for the future, she heard a commotion outside. She rushed to the window and saw a scene of chaos and destruction. The village was on fire, flames leaping into the night sky, smoke billowing across the landscape. She immediately realized that this was no accident. This was an act of sabotage, a deliberate attempt to undermine her authority, to create chaos and fear, to pave the way for her downfall. She suspected Kesteven, but she had no proof. She rallied her men-at-arms, organized a firefighting effort, and worked tirelessly to contain the blaze, to save lives and property. She risked her own life, entering burning buildings, rescuing trapped villagers, her courage and determination inspiring those around her. As the fire raged, she saw a figure lurking in the shadows, a man she recognized as one of Kesteven's henchmen. He was carrying a torch, preparing to set another building alight. Rosamond, fueled by anger and a fierce determination to protect her people, confronted him. "Stop!" she cried, her voice ringing out above the roar of the flames. What are you doing? The man turned to her, his face twisted in a sneer. This is your fault, Lady Rosamond. You have brought this upon yourself. You should have accepted Lord Kesteven's offer. You should have yielded to his authority. He raised the torch, preparing to hurl it at a nearby cottage. Rosamond, acting instinctively, drew a small dagger, the one Hugh had used to kill Edmund, the one she had kept as a reminder of his courage, of his sacrifice. She lunged forward, her dagger striking true, piercing the man's arm. He cried out in pain, dropping the torch, his eyes widening in surprise and fear. Rosamond stood over him, her dagger raised, her expression fierce and unwavering. I will not allow you to harm my people, she said, her voice trembling with rage. I will not allow you to destroy my home. I will defend Whitmore, no matter the cost. The man, realizing that he was defeated, that he had underestimated her strength and her resolve, surrendered. Rosamond's men at arms apprehended him, and he was taken into custody. The fire was eventually extinguished, but the damage was extensive. Many homes had been destroyed, many lives had been disrupted, many people had been injured. But Rosamond's swift and decisive action had prevented further devastation, had saved countless lives, had proven her courage and her leadership. In the aftermath of the fire, Rosamond confronted Kesteven, accusing him of orchestrating the attack. He denied it, of course, but the evidence was overwhelming. The captured henchman confessed, implicating Kesteven and revealing his plot to destabilize Whitmore, to seize control of the estate. King Edric, informed of Kesteven's treachery, ordered his arrest and imprisonment. Kesteven's ambitions were thwarted, his schemes exposed, his power broken. Rosamond had triumphed over her enemies, had proven her worth, had secured the future of Whitmore. The flames of redemption, though born of destruction and violence, had ultimately cleansed the land, purifying it of treachery and deceit. Rosamond, emerging from the ashes of the fire, had become a symbol of hope, of resilience, of unwavering commitment to her people and her land. The trials she had endured, the challenges she had overcome, had forged her into a strong, compassionate, and just ruler, a woman who had earned the respect and the loyalty of her people, a woman who had honored the memory of her lost love by creating a better world, a world free from the shadows of the past, a world filled with the promise of a brighter future. The scars remained, but they were no longer a source of pain, but a testament to her strength, her courage, her unwavering determination to be the woman she was meant to be, a woman who would rule her own destiny, a woman who would never be defeated. Chapter 20. A New Dawn. Years passed, and Whitmore flourished under Rosamond's wise and just rule. The scars of the past, though still present, began to fade, replaced by a sense of peace, of prosperity, of renewed hope. Rosamond had proven herself a capable and compassionate leader, earning the respect and the loyalty of her people, establishing a legacy that would endure for generations to come. She never remarried, remaining true to the memory of her love for Hugh, but she found fulfillment in her duties, in her service to her people, in the knowledge that she had made a difference in the world. She had transformed Whitmore from a place of sorrow and uncertainty into a beacon of hope and resilience, a testament to the power of the human spirit to overcome adversity, to find strength in the face of loss, to create a better future. One spring morning, as she walked through the gardens of Whitmore, enjoying the beauty of the blossoming flowers and the warmth of the sun on her face, she noticed a young boy, no older than 10, practicing with a wooden sword in the training yard. He was a spirited lad, his movements clumsy but determined, his eyes filled with a fierce concentration. Rosamond approached him, her heart filled with a mixture of fondness and curiosity. "What is your name, young man?" she asked, her voice gentle and kind. The boy looked up at her, his face flushed with exertion, his eyes shining with pride. "My name is William, my lady," he said, his voice clear and strong. Rosamond's heart skipped a beat. The name, it was the same name as Hugh's brother, the brother he had mourned, the brother whose tragic death had haunted him for so long. "And who are your parents, William?" Rosamond asked, her voice trembling slightly. "My father is a soldier, my lady," the boy replied. "He served with Sir Hugh in the war. He saved his life once. My mother, she is a healer. She works in the village." Rosamund realized, with a sudden surge of emotion, that this boy was a symbol of hope, a representation of the future, a testament to the enduring power of love and loyalty. He was the child of two people who had been touched by Hugh's life, by his courage, by his sacrifice. He was a living embodiment of the legacy that Hugh had left behind, a legacy of bravery, of compassion, of unwavering commitment to duty. She knelt down and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, her eyes filled with tears. "You have a noble name, William," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "And you have a brave heart. I am sure you will grow up to be a fine man, a worthy successor to those who came before you." The boy smiled at her, his eyes filled with a newfound confidence. "Thank you, my lady," he said. I will try my best." Rosamund stood up and watched him as he resumed his practice, his movements now infused with a greater sense of purpose, a greater sense of determination. She realized that she had found a new purpose, a new reason to live, a new way to honor Hugh's memory. She would mentor this boy, guide him, teach him, help him to become the man he was meant to be. She would also continue to rule Whitmore wisely and justly, to protect her people, to promote peace and prosperity, to ensure that the legacy of her love for Hugh, the legacy of his courage and his sacrifice, would endure for generations to come. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the gardens of Whitmore, Rosamund stood alone, her heart filled with a sense of peace, of contentment, of renewed hope. The new dawn had arrived, bringing with it the promise of a brighter future, a future built on the foundations of love, of loyalty, of unwavering commitment to duty. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined her. She had emerged from the darkness, stronger, wiser, more compassionate, a woman who had found her true purpose, a woman who had honored her lost love by creating a better world, a woman who had finally found peace. The air, filled with the scent of blossoms and the gentle whisper of the wind, seemed to carry a message of hope, of renewal, of the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome adversity, to find strength in the face of loss, to create a future worthy of the sacrifices that had been made. The cycle of life continued, the torch passed on to a new generation, a new dawn breaking over Whitmore, a new era of peace and prosperity beginning, a testament to the enduring power of love, of loyalty, of the unwavering human spirit. Epilogue. Many years later, Lady Rosamund, her hair now silvered with age, but her eyes still shining with the same unwavering spirit, sat on a bench in the gardens of Whitmore, watching the children play. Among them was a young girl, her granddaughter, named Eleanor, a child with Rosamund's golden hair and Hugh's piercing gray eyes. The girl ran up to Rosamund, her laughter echoing through the gardens, her arms filled with wild flowers. "Grandmother," she said, her voice filled with joy, "look what I found." Rosamund smiled, her heart filled with a profound sense of contentment. She took the flowers, their delicate petals soft against her skin, their fragrance a reminder of the beauty and the bounty of the land she had ruled for so long. "They are beautiful, Eleanor," she said, her voice gentle and kind. "Just like you." The girl sat beside her, her small hand reaching for Rosamund's, her fingers interlacing with her own. "Grandmother," she said, her voice serious now, "tell me a story. Tell me about Sir Hugh." Rosamund's heart ached with a familiar pang of loss, but it was also filled with a sense of peace, of acceptance, of the enduring power of love. She looked at her granddaughter, at the child who represented the future, the legacy of all that she had lived for, all that she had fought for. "Sir Hugh," she began, her voice filled with emotion, "was a brave and noble knight. He was a man of honor, of duty, of unwavering commitment to his people. He was my husband, and I loved him very much." She told the girl stories of Hugh's courage, of his kindness, of his unwavering spirit. She told her of their love, of their struggles, of the challenges they had overcome together. She told her of the darkness of the past, of the loss and the grief, but she also told her of the hope, of the resilience, of the enduring power of the human spirit. As she spoke, she realized that she was not just telling a story, she was passing on a legacy of love, of loyalty, of unwavering commitment to duty. She was sharing the lessons she had learned, the wisdom she had gained, the strength she had found within herself. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the gardens, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Rosamund and Eleanor sat together, their hands clasped tightly, their hearts connected by a bond that transcended time, that transcended loss, that transcended even death. As the last rays of sunlight faded, Rosamund felt a sense of peace, of completion, of a life well lived. She had faced her trials, she had overcome her challenges, she had honored the memory of her lost love by creating a better world. She had found her purpose, she had fulfilled her destiny, she had become the woman she was meant to be. She looked at Eleanor, at the child who represented the future, the promise of a new dawn, and she knew that her legacy would endure, that the spirit of Whitmore, the spirit of love and loyalty, would live on, passed down from generation to generation, a testament to the enduring power of the human heart. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Rosamund closed her eyes, a gentle smile on her lips, her heart filled with gratitude, with peace, with the quiet certainty that love, in the end, conquers all. The gardens of Whitmore, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight, held the echoes of laughter, the whispers of stories, the enduring presence of a love that had transcended time, a love that would live on forever, in the hearts of those who remembered, in the spirit of those who carried on, in the legacy of a woman who had found her strength, her purpose, her destiny, in the face of loss, in the midst of darkness, in the enduring power of love.